Hello everyone, my name is Jesse Lawford. I'm the executive pastor here at Encounter Church, and we truly have world-class ministry, and we know that God is going to do something through this message. So sit down, take notes, and see what God's going to do for you.
Yeah, this looks great in here. You guys are doing a great job. What's really neat to see for me is, I believe that God blesses and helps to grow the things that He wants to grow. You know what I mean? And so to see this church growing, it just means that God's got His hand on this place, and I'm really excited for where you've come over the last 5 years, because I think it has been about 5 years since I was here last. But I'm excited for where you're going in the future too. So what do you guys think the number one prayer request in every church in America is for every Sunday, categorically? It's for health and for healing. And like Pastor Craig said, we are mind, body, and spirit. And so I believe that we're all created for a purpose. Raise your hand if you believe that you're created for a purpose and not by accident and not just to suck air and take up space. You're on planet Earth for a purpose, but God also gave us a vessel called our body, and we need to take care of it, because when we're healthy, we have lots of energy, we have strength, we're resilient. I always say that strong people are harder to kill, right? And who knows that the enemy is trying to steal, kill, and destroy those people that are against him. And so when we take care of our bodies and we strengthen our bodies and we feed ourselves, we nourish ourselves, and we just take care of the physical vessel that God gave us, I believe that we're honoring God, but we're also preparing ourselves and setting ourselves up to do more of His work, to fulfill our purpose, right? So that's really why I'm here. And what I get really passionate about, I was just talking to Mary. Will you go to the next slide there, Adam? I was just talking to Mary about the fact that, I get to speak all over the place. If you don't know, I'm a chiropractor, but I'm also certified in functional medicine. My wife, Dr. Erin, she's also a chiropractor, functional medicine practitioner. Those are our kids and our dog, and we have a lot of fun. But we get to speak all over the place. We have a radio show, and I love doing that. But what lights me up more than anything else is talking to people in the church, because I think if there was one population in the world that should be healthier than everybody else and be the tip of the spear, leading the charge, setting the example, it should be us, right? Because when you're healthy, when you're vibrant, when you're strong, when you're confident, when you have lots of energy, who knows that that's attractive? It's an attractive force, and not attractive like male-female attractive, but it's attractive like people want to be around that. People get curious. People want to follow people who have lots of great energy, right? And we want people to follow us. Apostle Paul said, "Follow me as I follow Christ," right? And so this is one of the ways that we can create intrigue and, like I said, better serve God's purpose for our lives. Will you go to the next slide there? So this is our current state of health in America today. And I don't want to be a downer right off the bat, but in order to move forward, it's important to know where we currently are, right? And this may be some people in this room right now or people that you know, but the reality is that, we're not doing well. If you just look at some of these statistics, 1 out of 3 people in America today is diagnosed with cancer. Who knows someone who is or was diagnosed with cancer? 1 out of 2 people has heart disease. 1 out of 3 people is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. This is crazy. I just looked this up today because this is rapidly changing. I mean, even just from last year, it's significantly worse. 1 out of 3 seniors now die with Alzheimer's. 3 out of the 4 grandparents, my wife's side of the family, 3 out of her 4 grandparents all died with Alzheimer's. I mean, it's just, they're calling it type 3 diabetes now. And we'll talk about why, and why cutting sugar out of your diet is not just going to help you lose weight and feel better, but also preserve your brain. 49% of Americans are overweight or obese. 1 out of 4 kids, this one hurts just because we have 4 kiddos. I know a lot of you do too. 1 out of 4 kids now, by the time they graduate high school, is put on a pharmaceutical, not an over-the-counter Tylenol or aspirin, but a prescription pharmaceutical. And the problem is, if you get put on that as a kid, most likely you end up on what as an adult? Either the same stuff, more or worse, right? Because medications, you guys know this, medications, although they can help you in a crisis, they don't ever solve the underlying cause of the problem. Like I always tell people in my workshops, like the cause of your headaches, for example, is never because there's a lack of ibuprofen in your head, The cause of indigestion is not a lack of Pepto-Bismol in your stomach. The cause of high blood pressure is not a lack of lisinopril in your heart. There's an underlying cause. And if all we ever do is palliate our symptoms and put a Band-Aid on it, whether it's a pharmaceutical or a pill, potion, or lotion, we don't ever fix the underlying cause. We end up getting worse. And even though we might feel better for a time because we're drugging our symptoms, we still end up progressing and get worse. And that's why in America, look at this, the United States is number one in the world in healthcare spending, but we're 37th in the world overall in terms of health and health outcomes. The United States takes more medications per capita than the next 9 closest countries combined. That's Canada, that's the UK, that's China, that's Japan, that's everybody else. In fact, what's crazy is if you added up, or if you calculated the total population in America and divided up the number of prescriptions that were actually filled, some people don't even fill their prescriptions, but the ones that were filled last year, if you just divided that up into the total population, that would mean that the average person in America, including brand new babies, was on 12 medications last year. That's how many medications are being consumed by America today, or by Americans today. And again, I'm not against medications. My mom's an ICU nurse. We've got lots of nurses who are patients. I've got good friends who are pharmacists and orthopedists and anesthesiologists. But they would agree with me that medications, although they can help you in a crisis, they're not the solution to you expressing and manifesting optimal health, right? And this whole talk tonight is called Designed to Heal, because God tells us that He's created our bodies whole and perfect, right? He's created us in His image. And so the problem is, like I said in the beginning, is that when you have a health issue, when there's something that's interfering with your health or robbing you of your health, it doesn't just affect the way that you feel. When people have health issues, a lot of times we get microscopic, or we get focused on our symptoms or our pain, which are important, but it ends up affecting everything. I mean, it affects your family time, it affects your career potentially, definitely affects your ability to produce and provide. I believe that it can interfere with people's faith. I mean, how many people have you talked to or had to have hard conversations where their faith was really rattled or uncertain because of a health issue, right? And then, of course, your purpose. And again, this is not what God intended. If you want to go to the next one, these are a few of my favorites from God's Word. You go to the next slide, Adam. Genesis 1:21 said, "So God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God He created man, or He created them, male and female He created them." Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And again, I believe that that also includes our physical body. You know, I don't believe that God created us and put us on earth just as a holding space so that we could hurry up and get to heaven. You know, one of the things that really just kind of rubs me the wrong way, or it's just sad when I hear people say this. Like, we have patients that come into the office and they have really bad health or in a ton of pain, and you guys have heard this expression too. It's like, "Oh man, I can't wait till God takes me to heaven. You know, I just can't wait to get to heaven. It's going to be so much better." And I agree. I do think it's going to be better than here. But I also know that if there's breath in your lungs and you have a heartbeat, God's not done with you. You have a purpose here. So you would never want to abdicate your purpose here just to hurry up and get to heaven, right? Because God made one of you. He knew you before you were in your mother's womb. He created a plan and a purpose for you, and He gave you something to do here. And if you're still alive, even if you're hurting, even if you're stuck in a nursing home, even if you can't walk, as long as you have breath in your lungs and a heartbeat, I believe that God's not done with you. You still have a purpose, right? But it's also your responsibility. Like, you can't just sit back and expect God to heal you. Now, does miraculous healing happen? Of course it does. I believe that it does all the time. But I also believe that it's our responsibility to take action. And the way I've always looked at it is, it's kind of like, and not that we all intentionally do this, but if for some reason we were to rack up a bunch of credit card debt and then sit back and just pray and pray and pray and pray and pray for God to eliminate our debt and take it away, could God do that? I think He could. He could do anything. I also believe that God created laws and principles for us to live by, which you can find in the Bible, by the way, you guys know, right? And when we break those laws and principles, like any good dad, there is an element of letting you kind of reap the consequences, right? And now, as a good dad, I mean, I got 4 kids. There's a lot of times when I step in and save my kids just because I don't want to see them suffer. right? But there's also a part of me that wants them to learn responsibility and to take ownership, right? And I feel like that's our charge, is to take ownership and responsibility. And it's possible. I love what Pastor Craig said at the beginning, that this is the year of believe for you guys. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight, I'm going to talk about 5 key elements, principles, I believe, that will help you heal from literally anything. I mean, you could be stage 4 cancer tonight and be here. I still believe that your body can heal. But one of the most important things is you have to believe it in your mind. You have to believe that you can heal, and you have to believe that there's potential in your body, because if you don't believe it, you're not going to receive it. You guys know that? Will you play that video?
Meet the 86-year-old nun who takes on triathlons after church hours.
The only failure is not to try.
She's the Iron Nun, also known as Sister Madonna Buter. At 86 years old, she's broken more barriers than many people half her age, competing in more than 40 Ironman triathlons. A challenge that would still be tough for someone 1/4 her age. Each triathlon consists of a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, and 26.2-mile run. Sister Madonna was first introduced to running when she was 48 years old by a priest who encouraged it as a way to harmonize the mind, body, and soul. Now, Sister Madonna has integrated training into her everyday life. She says she runs to her Spokane, Washington church every day and bikes 40 miles to a lake near her house to swim. The Agile Nun completed her first triathlon in Ireland in 1982 when she was 52 years old. And in 2005, she became the oldest woman to ever compete in the Hawaii Ironman, the same time she earned the nickname Iron Nun. More than 10 years later, she's still going strong, pushing for races to open up older age groups so she can compete, telling Cosmo, "I have opened up about 5 age groups in my life that never existed. In fact, at 82 years old, she broke an Ironman record for the fastest finishing time in the 80 to 84 age group. It's a record that still stands today." The Iron Nun is becoming even more popular after she was recently featured in a Nike commercial, showing her running, swimming, and biking, Ironman style. The ad celebrates her extraordinary stamina and resilience. Nike said they chose to feature her because she's an athlete who refuses to conform to the conventional ideas of age. But that doesn't mean she hasn't faced challenges along the way. She fractured her pelvis while training a few years ago and was unable to complete the Hawaii Ironman triathlon in 2014. But she doesn't plan on quitting anytime soon and wants to remind people that setbacks are not failures.
Your effort in itself is a success.
Share if you're
You can
amazed
cut
by
it, Adam.
Sister Madonna's strength.
I love that. That doesn't mean that you got to go out and start doing triathlons, although I think they're kind of fun. But it just goes to show you what's possible, right? I mean, it's possible. You can do it. Just because everyone else in America is not doing that doesn't mean that that's not possible. And I actually believe that that's the normal, not the Ironman part necessarily, but the health part and the physical part and the ability part and the mental fortitude part and the healing from a fractured pelvis. I just read a study earlier today that said that if you're over the age of 65 and you fall and break a hip, you have a 40% chance of not even living 12 months beyond that. Almost 50% of people who are 65 or older who fall and break a hip. And it's not the hip, you guys get that. It's not the hip that kills you. It's all of a sudden you go sedentary, you end up developing a bunch of other health issues, and it's just this downward spiral. So you don't have to experience what everybody else has experienced, but if you want something different than what everybody else has, you have to do something different than what everybody else does. That's a writer downer. You write that down. And that's not mine. I stole it fair and square. But if you want different results than everybody else, you got to do something different, right? And Einstein said something kind of along those lines, that we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking that we used to create them, right? So we got to think differently. And tonight's all about health, and it starts with the definition of health. Will you go to the next one there, Adam? The definition of health. And this is important because most people, if you were to ask the average person on the street, how do you judge your health or how do you define your health? Most people would say, I judge my health by how I what? By how I feel. Now, if you're healthy, you should feel great, but just because you feel great doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy. Right? It's not a two-way street. You don't always feel everything that's happening in your body. This is a perfect example. This is my mother-in-law, Katie, and our daughter, Elle, and that picture was taken 7.5 years ago, and in that picture, my mother-in-law, Katie, looked and felt totally fine. She had no symptoms. She was 62 years old. She was on no medications, technically a completely clean bill of health. And about a month after that picture was taken, she started having really bad back pain and indigestion. So she went to her doctor, they checked it out, they ended up running all these tests, and ultimately they found that she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And 5 weeks after her test results came back, she passed away. So in less than 4 months, she went from looking good and feeling good, spending time on vacation with our family, to taking her last breath on planet Earth. And it's not because she developed the cancer after that picture was taken. You guys get that, right? In fact, when they ran all the tests and the scans, they determined that that cancer had probably been metastasizing throughout her body for over 10 years. And she had no symptoms. And that's not uncommon. 9 out of 10 people that have a heart attack, that's the first thing they ever feel, is when you start to have the chest pain and the numbness and tingling and the weakness, and you go to the floor. Even though it takes about 20 years of plaque buildup and arterial sclerosis and everything else before you actually have a heart attack. Cancer is the same way. In fact, most of the time, statistically speaking, it takes 8 to 10 years of cancer development before you have symptoms. So my point is that the definition of health is not how you feel. The definition of health is how you function. Health is how you function. And according to Dorland's Medical Dictionary, that's actually what it says, that health is the optimal state of function mentally, socially, physically, not just the absence of symptoms or disease. It's all about function. And you just need to know that when your body's functioning at 100%, you manifest optimal health. I believe that's how we're created to live, is in perfect health. And studies actually have been able to prove from the University of Harvard Medical School that our bodies are designed to last about 120 years. So the materials of our body will not even start to die until you're about 110 to 120 years old. So why do people die young? We all think it's great. If someone lives to 90, it's like, oh man, they lived a long, healthy, happy life. They lived a pretty good life. You know, I hear this all the time from people that lose a loved one. It's like, well, he lived to 90. That's pretty good. And yeah, relative to everybody else, that is pretty good. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, the guy gave up 30 years. What could God have done with him for another 30 years, right? If he would have taken care of himself, he would have got to see his grandkids, his great-grandkids. He could have continued to pass down generational wisdom to other generations. You get what I'm saying? And so obviously you can't control. I mean, the Bible says that no man knows the day or the time that they're going to expire, and I believe that. But I also believe that God doesn't want to take us early, at least not unnecessarily. And I do think that things happen for a reason, and there's accidents, and there's unexplainable things, and tragedy. But I think when it comes to the things that we can control, we're supposed to take care of ourselves, and if we do, we last a long time, okay? So these are the 5 things that we're going to talk about tonight. If you want to go to this next slide there, this is actually our practice model too. So our practice is called Summit Family Chiropractic. We're a Max Living clinic, and Max Living is basically a model of healthcare that includes chiropractic, but it's way beyond that. So these are the 5 things that we focus on with all of our patients, and I just happen to love these 5 things because I personally think they're God's laws and principles of health and healing. Max Living just was able to take it and put it into a model of healthcare and practice. Okay, so we're going to go through these one by one. This is the part where you're probably going to want to take some notes. We're going to start with mindset. And in Romans 12:2, it says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You guys have heard that a million times. But when I think of that, I think that when it comes to thinking about your health and what you do for your health, we should be looking at what everybody else does and probably look at doing the opposite. Maybe not every single time, but again, if everybody else is doing this set of things for health and health care, and we all know that these are the outcomes on the other side, which are not great outcomes, then we should probably stop and think about what those things are and at least consider what it might look like to do the opposite. I'm not saying every time, because there's some value in our healthcare system for sure, but I believe that the church is counterculture for a good reason. We want to be counterculture. We want this alternate universe in here that's set apart, unique, and distinct from all the other stuff that's going on out there. I think when it comes to thinking about your health, it's very similar. All right, you want to roll that video?
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well traveled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep traveling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
So I want to give you a really practical way to address your habits and your mindset, because I think all of us here know that, a salad's better than a Snickers bar. You know that taking a walk is better than sitting on the couch, that going to bed early is better than staying up on a Netflix binge. You don't need me to tell you that. However, we all struggle with these habits, and it's like, man, I try, and a lot of us, I think we're waiting for this like aha epiphany moment or this God moment where all of a sudden God changes our brain and our desire and our heart, and it's like, oh, all of a sudden we have this Tony Robbins experience, and we come back after walking on hot coals, so to speak, and we're totally changed. That can happen, but there's a lot easier, more practical way to do it, and it's through habituation. There's this thing called the belief cycle. You guys may have seen something like this in the past, but the cycle is essentially that your beliefs and thoughts create your feelings. So whatever you feel is predicated by your beliefs or your thoughts. Like when you flip on the news, like if you watched the State of the Union address last night, however that made you feel, good or bad, was predicated based on what you believed before you watched that. You guys get what I'm saying? So your reaction, which with feelings are just reactions to stimulus and your environment, is predicated based on your beliefs and thoughts, and then those feelings motivate your actions. You take actions or you take certain actions based on the way you feel about things, and then those actions obviously produce a result. And so my point is that a lot of people get hung up in the beliefs and thoughts and the feelings part of it. So there is something to be said for just drawing a line in the sand and just deciding, I believe this, I'm going to do this. And that's great. If you can do that and you can muster up the willpower to just draw that line in the sand and hold firm, perfect. However, that's easier said than done. Feelings are probably the hardest thing to manage because you feel the way you feel. And it's like, you feel a certain way and you know you shouldn't. It's like, I don't care. I just do feel this way. Has anybody ever been mad and just wanted to stay mad? Or am I the only one? It's like, just let me be mad for a minute. I kind of like it. I'll be over it if you just give me a second. Right now, I kind of like just feeling sorry for myself and being mad. You can't fight your feelings, or it's very hard. Actions is the habituation part. Listen, the root word of identity, and I'm not talking about your identity in Christ. That's different. I'm talking about who you are as a person today. Your beliefs, thoughts, feelings, your identity, the Latin root word of identity is repeated beingness. What you repeatedly do will ultimately shape your identity, which will change your thoughts and beliefs, which will change your feelings, which will reinforce what you do, which will produce a certain action. What am I getting at? I'm getting at, if you want to be a person who is a healthy eater, guess what? Just make yourself eat healthy consistently. Just do the thing and do it over and over and over again. You don't have to be perfect, But if you have more wins than losses, you end up with, at the end of the season, with a winning record. You get what I'm saying? And if you're in the NFL, you still end up making it to playoffs somehow with a 9-7 record. I don't get that, but if you follow football, you know what I'm saying. So just do the thing. If you just do the thing, and you might say, well, I don't feel like it. Well, nobody said anything about how you feel. It's not about how you feel. If you want different results, you just got to do different things, and you got to do them consistently. And before you know it, if you do it enough, you just become the person who does it. It's like, well, I'm not a morning person. I'm not a person who likes to work out. Just do it. If you just do it, you become it. And when you become it, you start to think and believe it. You start to feel it. And then it just becomes part of who you are, right? In 2 Corinthians, the Bible says, take every thought captive. And what I always think about with that scripture is that those moments where you don't feel like it. I mean, I didn't feel like it this morning. I had a long day yesterday, super long day today. I mean, I started at like 6:30, and here we are at whatever it is, 7:30 and a.m. that was. And so I just didn't feel like it this morning. But I took that thought captive, and I don't always win, so I'm not saying I'm perfect at this. What I am saying is there are moments every single day where the enemy tries to lie to you, and the enemy says, you're tired, it's dark out, it's cold, it's rainy, you don't want to go out there, you don't want to do that, you don't want to go to the gym, you don't need to do that, it doesn't really matter, right? You broke your habit promise yesterday, what's one more day, right? There are all these lies that the enemy is trying to tell us every single day, and we don't win them all, but if you can, in the moment, stop and think about what you're thinking about, take that thought captive, tell yourself the truth based on what God says about you in the Bible, right, that you are a conqueror and an overcomer, you have a lot more success. But you have to believe it before you can become it. And I just have a quick example of this. So if you want to go to this next one here. So 4 years ago, I went to Chicago for a seminar, and I stayed with a buddy who lives in South Chicago, who's a chiropractor, and every Tuesday morning he plays in a men's basketball league. And these are all guys that like used to play college sports and like really good athletes. And so of course I didn't want to let my buddy down, and I, even at the time I was 36, I kind of thought I was 18 still. So I went out and played basketball, and about 30 minutes into it, I snapped my Achilles tendon in half. And so that's the MRI on the left, and that space that you can see on where the two ends don't connect, that's my Achilles tendon. So that's a 2-centimeter separation. And by any other standard, or all medical standards, that's a surgical situation. And I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place for surgery. Obviously there is. But I didn't believe that that was the best thing for me, and I also believed that my body could heal. In fact, I remember the exact moment when I was sitting in the kitchen. It was like 8 o'clock at night, and I had a pre-op scheduled for the next morning at 6 a.m. at Kootenai. And I had to call. It's something crazy, like if you call by 9 p.m. or something, you can cancel or move it or whatever it was. And I was sitting in my kitchen with my wife, watching our kids run around the living room, and I just thought to myself, I'm like, man, if God could take a cell from me and a cell from her, put them together, and 9 months later we have that, surely he could take two ends of this connective tissue and bring them 2 centimeters closer and get them to heal. You know what I mean? Have you ever stopped? Of course you have if you have kids, but life is a miracle. It really is a miracle. Like the way that God's created our bodies, our bodies are so much more powerful than we could ever imagine, right? And this is not to say that with every time you get hurt or you get injured or you get sick, you should just sit back and like hope and pray and cross your fingers. But I will tell you that I canceled the surgery that I was scheduled for. I did a bunch of stuff, like I got a cast and I was in a walking boot, and I did a bunch of holistic type stuff. But the orthopedic surgeon that I saw, I told him, I said, hey, listen, I don't feel good about the surgery. I'm going to see how it goes not doing the surgery. And he goes, you're making a big mistake. I guarantee you're going to be back in here 6 months because you're going to re-tear it. And even if you don't, it's going to be at least a year until you even start to run again. And if you know me, you don't want to tell me stuff like that, because I'm going to try to do the exact opposite in a hurry. And so 13 months later, I actually completed a full-distance Ironman triathlon up in Canada. And no surgery, no drugs, never even took an ibuprofen. What's my point? It's not to tell you that I'm Superman. Just like the Iron Nun, there's nothing special about her. That's the way that God's created your body. It's designed to heal. It's designed to heal. And you might be thinking, well, that's great for you, but you don't know my condition. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know what I'm going through. I've already tried this. I've tried this. I've tried this. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. My point is that you have to believe it first. You have to believe it first. If you don't believe it, it doesn't matter what you do. If you don't believe it, you can eat organic, you can take supplements, you can come to my office and get adjusted, you can work out. It's not going to work. And I have patients like that. We give them the best care possible. We spend a ton of time with them. We give them the best protocol for nutrition and supplements, and they don't get better. Why? Because they don't believe it here. They've identified themselves as someone who's in pain and sick. You got to believe it to become it. All right, next essential, we're going to talk about nutrition. It's really simple, and these are principles. I've tried to chunk these down into principle. Principle number 1 with your mindset is you got to believe it to become it. Principle number 2 with nutrition is eat food by God, not food by man. Yes, nutrition could be a little bit more complex than that, and yes, there are individualities between all of us. But generally speaking, this would solve 80% of your nutritional conundrums if you would just focus on eating food by God, not food by man. Listen, God created us, He created planet Earth, and He made the two to go together. Do you see what I'm saying? If you would just eat food in the way that you can find it in nature, or the closest form to how it's found in nature, and that goes for animal products, that goes for produce, you're going to be a lot healthier. You're going to be a lot better off. Versus stuff that comes in a package, stuff that's been processed, stuff that's filled with fillers and preservatives and genetically modified food and artificial sweeteners and flavors and colors and all those different things. Is there a time and a place for some of that stuff? Of course. You know, if you're on the road, you're on a plane, you don't have options, we all do it. But the majority of the time, if you can eat food by God, not food by man, you're going to be a lot better. And the reason why this is easy, I think, is if you live your life based on principle and not necessarily on science and the details and all the little nuances, because you can get really lost in the nuances, especially if you pay attention to anybody online. Even though most of them are mostly right, there's so many nuances that you can become paralyzed, paralysis by analysis, that whole thing. So eat food by God, not food by man. And the number one thing that you should focus on in terms of removing is, you guys already know this, the standard American diet is a high-fat, bad fat, not good fat, because good fat's good for you, but high-fat, sugar, ultra-processed foods. The number one thing that you should focus on eliminating from your diet is sugar and anything that changes to sugar. And this is the part where y'all don't like me, because this is all the fun stuff. This is cookies, crackers, chips, rice, pasta, bread, all those things. And that doesn't mean forever and totally, but this stuff should be a very small percentage of your diet. And the reason why is that sugar is an anti-nutrient. Sugar is also toxic to our cells. Sugar also robs us and depletes our body of other nutrients and minerals. And that's not necessarily all sugar all the time. Like if you're eating Dave's Killer Bread or homegrown or homemade sourdough bread or ancient grain pasta or basmati or jasmine rice or something like that, there is nutritional value to those things. So I'm not saying cut out all those things, but those things should still only make up a small percentage of your diet, right? We have the standard American diet food guide pyramid, which unfortunately is put out by the FDA every year, and it's upside down. Literally, it should be flipped upside down. I mean, they're saying that the average American should get 60% of their calories from carbohydrates every single day. And the problem is, your metabolism will become conditioned to burn whatever you feed it most. So if you consistently eat most of your calories from the form of sugar or carbohydrates, you're a what? You're a sugar burner. And so if you're a sugar burner, as soon as there's no sugar in your system, which your body is extremely efficient at taking glucose or sugar out of food and putting that sugar or glucose into either cells or into your liver and your muscles in the form of glycogen, and the rest of it gets excreted. But there's very little sugar that remains in your bloodstream for very long. That's why if you eat a big pasta dinner and you're so full you could barely drive home, and then 2 hours later you're like, how in the world am I hungry? Anybody been there? That's why. It's because sugar is like kindling for a fire. It's a lot of quick energy, but it burns up fast. Whereas fats are more like the big logs for a fire. They produce ketones. It's slow burning, and a little bit goes a long way. And you might need some sugar to get you going, right? But you want to really focus on healthy fats. And that's the thing. You want to cut sugar. And the reason why I got these slides up here, so I'm going to scroll through these kind of quick here, Adam, but people think that they don't eat sugar. In fact, I hear it all the time. It's like, oh, I don't like sweets. I'm not a sugar person. Listen to this. Average person drinks 55 gallons of soda pop per year. 1/3 of dietary sugar comes from soft drinks, and soft drinks actually even include fruit juices that we either consume or give our kids. And if you don't believe me, go home and look at the label on the back and look at the sugar content. I'm not telling you you're a bad parent, but you just got to be aware. Like, just because it's fruit juice doesn't mean that it's not loaded with sugar. Go to the next one here. Yeah, Sobe drink. Look at this. So Sobe drinks, I know these aren't that popular anymore. In fact, I haven't seen these in a long time, but Sobe drink or something that's equivalent, 61 grams of sugar. It's the equivalent of 4 slices of Sara Lee cherry pie. It's that much sugar. Go to the next one. Rockstar drink. Rockstar drink is considered a healthy energy drink, right? 62 grams of sugar is the equivalent of 6 Krispy Kremes. Go to the next one. I know. Throw your tomatoes at me now. It's okay, I got an alternative for you, because I'm a coffee drinker too. But listen, the Starbucks peppermint white chocolate mocha with whipped cream, because you can't leave out the whipped cream, 95 grams of sugar. It's 8.5 scoops of ice cream. You couldn't even eat that much ice cream. Well, maybe you could, but that's a lot of ice cream to try to eat in one setting. And it doesn't fill you up in a drink because they condense it with high fructose corn syrup in those syrup pumps, right? So here's a healthy alternative, because I know you're not going to quit your coffee, and I'm not either. But instead of sweetening it with all the pumped syrup in there, try sweetening it with either honey, which is still got a glycemic index that's higher than desired, but it's a lot better than the high fructose corn syrup stuff, or better yet, stevia. I love the fact that Starbucks and a lot of other coffee shops nowadays carry stevia packets, like stevia in the raw. And stevia is a plant that you can find in nature. What did we say? If you eat food by God, not food by man, you're a lot better off. And a lot of stevia maybe upset your gut a little bit or have other issues, but for all intents and purposes, why we're talking about it now, try to trade stevia for the sweet stuff. Okay, the Max Living Advanced Plan is not like a proprietary thing necessarily. Anybody heard of keto? So the Max Living Advanced Plan is basically just a really clean version of keto. There are so many health benefits to a ketogenic diet. Notice I didn't say being in ketosis your whole entire life. That's not healthy either. I want to give you a concept real quick, and we're not going to spend too much time on it, but it's called metabolic flexibility. There are 3 macronutrients, which means major categories of food. So for every food that's out there, it's either one or a combination of these 3 things. What are they? Carbohydrates, fat, and protein. So those are the 3 macronutrients. Everything you put in your mouth is one of those 3 things or a combination. And that's how your body derives energy. So metabolism really just means your body's ability to take food and turn it into energy, okay? Your body doesn't like to use protein because protein makes up the building blocks of all the bones and muscles and connective tissue in your body. So your body doesn't like to burn that, because it would be like if you were cold and you started taking 2x4s out of your wall, out of the structure of your house to put into the fireplace to get warm. Like, it would work, but you're kind of stealing from Peter to pay Paul. Do you get that? So your body really doesn't like to burn protein for fuel. It's very inefficient, and it's very costly to other systems of the body. So really, you got 2 left. It's carbs and fats. Carbs turn into glucose. Fats turn into ketones. And like I said, the best way to remember this is that carbs are like kindling for a fire. It's fast, quick, cheap energy. Fats are like the big logs on a fire. They take a lot longer to start burning, but once they start burning, it's a way more efficient fuel. And so metabolic flexibility means that you can bounce back and forth between the 2. It means if you go to Olive Garden and have some pasta and breadsticks, you can burn that sugar efficiently, but you can also burn the fat that comes with the gorgonzola sauce on the steak gorgonzola that you got as the entree. Has anybody got that before? It's been a while, but this used to be my favorite thing. So my point is that if you are, and most people, so here's the problem. If the average American gets 60% of their caloric calories per day from sugar, you're a sugar burner, not a fat burner, and so your body is efficient at burning sugar, but it also craves sugar when you're not full or in the process of eating, and it becomes very inefficient at burning fat. So what happens to all that fat that you consume? It gets stored because your body doesn't know what to do with it. It's not efficient at burning fat. And so even if you're eating a little bit of fat, your body stores it away. And the other thing is that when you consume that much sugar in the form of carbohydrates, your body can't consume or use all of that energy, and so that will ultimately gets turned to fat as well, right? So it's a double whammy. So my point is, if you want to become a fat burner, which we all do, right? Raise your hand if you'd like to be burning fat in your sleep every single night, basal metabolic rate's high, and it's just cranking out fat burning all night. The way to do that is to eat more fat. And I know this is a lot more popular than it used to be, but there was a time when a lot of people would say like, oh, fat makes you fat, fat's the devil, fat's bad for you. Fat is not bad for you. It's the inability to burn fat that makes you fat. And ironically, what causes that is too much sugar. So if you want to become metabolically flexible, the idea, and the reason why I started this whole conversation about clean keto is that that's essentially what a ketogenic diet is. A ketogenic diet, in terms of percentages, is about 5 to 10% of your daily calories coming from carbohydrates, 40 to 60% of your daily calories coming from fat, which sounds like a lot, but if you eat high-quality fats, it's actually not that much food. You get your fats from things like avocado, nuts and seeds, wild-caught fish, free-range chicken, grass-fed beef. I mean, we live in North Idaho. Go get yourself an elk. I finally got one after 5 years of trying this year. Praise God. It's not easy if you've done it. It's a lot of fun. And then the rest should be protein. Okay? The reason why I'm inserting this here is that this way of eating is the healthiest, but also the most healing way to eat. They have done studies with people that have cancer, arguably the most desperate people on the planet in terms of trying to do everything they can to heal so they don't die. And people that are put on a ketogenic diet last way longer. They've also found that when people are put on a strict ketogenic diet and they're also given chemotherapy simultaneously, the chemotherapy has been shown to be more powerful, exponentially more powerful at targeting cancer cells compared to someone who's taking the same chemotherapy dosage who's eating a standard American diet. Part of that is because sugar feeds cancer as well, right? We're not going to get too much into that tonight. The whole point is that if you can eat a clean ketogenic diet, your body will heal. When I tore my Achilles tendon, super clean ketogenic diet for 6 months. That wasn't the only thing, but I think it was one of the biggest things that helped my body heal. Okay, next one, exercise. An object in motion stays in motion, Newton's first law. You guys have heard that? Use it or lose it. Fitness is not looking good in the gym. Fitness is not muscles. Fitness is not a 5-minute mile. Those are all markers of fitness, but fitness, in my definition, is really just your body's ability to live your life. It's being able to get down on the ground and play with your kids and get back up again. It's getting up off the toilet at a certain age, right? It's being able to carry your groceries in. It's being able to climb a mountain or go hunt for an elk or whatever it might be. Whatever you want to be able to do in life, those desires have to be met with a certain level of fitness. And so in my opinion, fitness is defined by whatever life you want to live. If you want to run Ironman triathlons, obviously you need a certain level of fitness. But for her, that's fulfilling, it's spiritual, she feels connected to God, all those things requires fitness. For you, it might just be daily life and taking care of kids. It doesn't matter. There's not a right and a wrong. But fitness is just your body's ability to live life. But you got to understand that if you don't focus on fitness, fitness just doesn't just happen. Right? An object in motion stays in motion. You got to use it or lose it. Listen to this. 30% of mortality, already talked about this, 30% of mortality in people over 65 who break their hip. So I want to give you a couple of tips. Actually, this is good too. Next slide. Exercise and medication. So this is super important because I read a study about the American church a few years ago, and it broke my heart. It was astounding. I didn't believe it at first. 6 out of 10 people in the American church are reported to have extreme anxiety or depression. In a community where we should be more hopeful than anybody else. I mean, God's given us the keys to heaven, right? And he's given us a purpose and a plan and his word and this way to do life and all these things. And we still have so much anxiety and depression. 6 out of 10, that's the majority. The majority of God's people are depressed or anxious, right? And again, it's not because there's not enough medication in the brain. Are there chemical imbalances in certain situations? Of course there are. But I don't believe it's 60% of the time, right? And I don't believe there's one magic bullet. There's not a panacea that if you just did this one thing. So what I'm not saying is just go to the gym, you'll feel fine. It's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that if we look at all the pillars of health and we address each one of them systematically, you can feel better in your body. And if you feel better in your body, who knows that you feel better in your mind? And if you feel better in your mind, you just feel better as a whole. They did do a study. They've actually done several now. But they've shown that exercise is more beneficial in terms of reducing anxiety and depression than antidepressants. More beneficial. Why is that? Well, it's because when you exercise, a bunch of stuff happens. Number one, you release endorphins. Endorphins are feel-good hormones. When you exercise, you also release dopamine. Dopamine is the addiction happiness hormone. And dopamine is not a bad thing, although it can be leveraged as a bad thing because dopamine is what caused you to get addicted to crack cocaine, gambling, but it's also what causes you to get addicted to family time and date night with your wife and going to the gym and being prosperous, in your business or in your financial life, right? Because those small wins produce dopamine in your brain, and dopamine's addictive. And when you exercise, your brain produces dopamine and endorphins. And you cannot be anxious or depressed if you have dopamine and endorphins flowing through your brain and your bloodstream, right? And so this is kind of a hack to overcome that. Now, you can't just exercise all day, every day. Eventually, you probably should think about what's causing all that, but it's one way where you can minimize that and reduce cortisol too. So I want to give you a tip on how to actually practically do this, because my philosophy on exercise is that anything is better than nothing, right? There really is no form of bad exercise, in my opinion, but there's also a concept or a principle of smarter, not harder. And so what studies have shown is that if you do an hour of traditional cardio, which is great, I ran for an hour at lunch today, it's fantastic, do that if you like it. But an hour of traditional cardio, afterward, your body will continue to burn calories and fat for about 4 hours. It's called the afterburn effect, okay? The other thing, though, that also happens that's not so awesome is that long distance, slow intensity, or low intensity, long duration cardio exercise also increases inflammation in your body. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but too much, too often can be a bad thing. That's why a lot of times you look at these endurance athletes and that's all they do is like marathons or super endurance sports. And a lot of times they don't look super, super healthy. You guys know what I'm saying? Right? So it's important that you do a mix of things. High intensity interval training, if time is an issue and know-how is an issue, and just being able to go to the gym and figure out what to do, I would highly recommend high-intensity interval training. It's really simple, and I've given you an example here. You can take a screenshot of it. But high-intensity interval training is essentially where you go all out with some kind of movement, whether it's push-ups, jumping jacks, the bike, the treadmill, shoveling snow. I mean, we do this with our kids, and we time it. We make it fun, play music. High intensity is where you go all out for a short period of time, whether it's 10, 20, 30 seconds, and then you take a break of equal duration. And then you do it again, and then you take a break, and then you do it again, and then you take a break. And this oscillation of exertion gets your heart rate really high and then gets it really low, and then gets it really high and gets it really low. And when you do that, it actually forces the release of growth hormone and testosterone in your body. And not the amount of testosterone that's going to give you like a mustache if you're a woman or something like that. So you don't have to worry about that. But it's enough to where it'll kick in your fat-burning mechanisms. Testosterone and growth hormone are extremely ketogenic or fat-burning. And so they have found that in as little as 10 to 12 minutes of high-intensity interval training, your body will continue to burn fat and calories for up to 36 hours later. So in terms of smarter, not harder, you put an hour in of slow or low-intensity, long-duration exercise, and you get 4 hours of afterburn, or you put 12 minutes in of high-intensity interval training, and you get 36 hours of afterburn, right? This is why a lot of times you go to the gym and you're slogging it out on the elliptical or the treadmill or the bike, and you look over and you see these guys lifting weights, and it's like they're in and out in 20 minutes, and they're shredded, and you're like, what the? I'm over here like killing myself for like 3 times as long. Why do they get to look like that? Well, most likely it's because of the growth hormone and testosterone that's being produced in their body because they're high-intensity intervals, okay? Again, I'm not saying don't do the cardio stuff. I like it too, but I would say mix it up, okay? Next section, detoxification. Here's the principle. You ready? If you wouldn't put it in your body, don't put it on your body. So this is key. We all know that we shouldn't go home and drink Clorox. At least you should know that. If you didn't, you're welcome. You shouldn't do that, okay? The problem is we use stuff like that, maybe not Clorox, but we use stuff like that, and what do? We wipe the counters with it, and then what happens? Then we put food on the counter, right? We cut apples, cut cheese, we have produce that's on the counter, or we're just touching the counter and then putting food in our mouth. It might not be the same amount, but over time, it builds up. Same thing with laundry detergent. You wash your clothes in laundry detergent, and then you wear your clothes all day long. Well, you have these things in your skin, these little holes called pores, and those pores let things through your skin. That's why when you sweat gets out. But if stuff can get out, stuff can get in. And the problem is that when stuff goes through your skin, it's actually less filtered than when stuff goes in your mouth. Because when stuff goes in your mouth, at least you have enzymes in your saliva, you have acid in your stomach, you have enzymes in your GI tract, you have bile from your gallbladder and your liver that can help process and eliminate stuff out the other end, if you know what I'm saying. Whereas when stuff goes through your skin, it goes directly into your bloodstream. And so much of the stuff that we use, whether it's cleaning products, personal care products, shampoo, makeup, deodorant, toothpaste, soap, detergents, cleaning supplies, end up inside of our bodies one way or another. And it's insidious, meaning you don't notice it right away. But toxins cause a lot of things. Number one, toxins are the number one cause of neurodegenerative disorders in America today. What's a neurodegenerative disorder? Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. 1 out of 3 people over 65 will die with Alzheimer's or some form of dementia. This is a thing we should all be paying attention to. Nobody wants that, and toxins are the number one cause. And it's not the obviously toxic stuff. It's all the little things that we use on a regular basis that we're not really paying attention to, that we don't have a reaction to right at the moment, but over time bioaccumulate and eventually wreak havoc on our nervous system and then eventually other parts of our body. So the principle is if you wouldn't put it in your body, meaning in your mouth, don't put it on your body. How do you know? Well, go home and read the label. I mean, I challenge you tonight. Go home and in your pantry or your bathroom. I think the bathroom is the best place to start because it's probably the stuff you use the most often, hopefully. You're showering every day and brushing your teeth multiple times a day, whereas you might only do laundry a couple times a week. But the point is, take your soap or your shampoo or your toothpaste and look at the ingredients. And if you can't pronounce it, most likely it's a chemical that you shouldn't put in your body. For example, propylene glycol, very, very common, found in a lot of soaps. Kind of makes it oily a little bit. You know why? Because it's one chemical reaction away from antifreeze. Propylene glycol is also in a lot of antiperspirants. Why? Because if you put antifreeze in your armpits, you will not sweat. I promise you. Go try it. Literally, these companies know that, and I'm not kidding. Propylene glycol will make you not sweat, which sounds nice, but you need to sweat. Sweating's good for you. Not sweating is not good for you, right? Sodium lauryl sulfate, SLS, that's another one. That's what makes things bubbly. So when you use soap or use toothpaste and it's really, really bubbly, the chemical that's doing that is SLS. That's why if you've ever bought anything that's natural from like the health food store and you're like, this soap doesn't even bubble. Well, it's saving your life because there's no SLS in there, right? And there are other ways that you can get the bubbles. But my point is, read the labels, and if you can't pronounce it, most likely it's a chemical that you should not put in your body. This is why this matters, and just from a vanity standpoint, and not that this is a bad thing, but toxins also make us fat. there's been really interesting research that's come out over the last 10 years that has basically shown, I mean, this, if you look at the middle paragraph, the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians states that belly fat isn't hormone-induced. We all think that it's hormones related, right? I'm just in that season, or I'm, whatever. It's hormones. It's not, some of it's hormones, but most of it is not. It's not even age-induced. It's fat produced to protect us from the toxins that we accumulate as we age. And this makes perfect sense. Because when a toxin goes into your body, by definition, the toxin has the potential to wreak havoc on our system, whether it's an organ or the nervous system or the circulatory system or our heart or a vital organ. And so the body innately, God's made us whole and perfect, right? Our body has this innate intelligence, this inborn intelligence. It's always fighting to protect us and restore homeostasis. So in God's infinite wisdom, he gave us this innate intelligence that has this mechanism inside of it to where when you have a toxin that either goes in your mouth or through your skin or wherever, your body sends fat to sequester or insulate that toxin, which is a really smart thing. Because it's protecting your body from that toxin. Does that make sense? The problem is, it stays there. You have this toxin that's wrapped up in fat, and your body puts it away. And then there's another one, and it puts it away, and it puts it away, and it puts it away, and before you know it, you've got all this fat accumulation, and it's because your fat is holding on to those toxins. And then the frustrating part is that you go to eat right, you start exercising, you start hydrating, you fast, you do all these things, you take supplements, and you can't lose weight. Why is that? Well, it's because in order to lose that weight specifically, you've got to first detoxify or get those toxins out of your body. Because as long as those toxins are in there, your body cares more about sequestering those toxins than it does about burning that fat for fuel. Does that make sense? It's the number one cause of weight loss resistance. If you've ever tried a plan, tried a diet, tried a workout, and you just didn't get very far, you got to a certain point and you got stuck, that's why. It's because of toxins. And then here's another interesting thing. It's a bad thing, but it's also an interesting thing and a thing that I think is brilliant in God's perfect design. Listen to this. Presence of toxins, they've been able to show that the presence of toxins will reprogram your DNA. So you're born with your DNA, but the presence of the consistent presence of toxins will reprogram your DNA, change your biochemistry to produce fat in anticipation for future toxins coming in your body. Isn't that interesting? That your DNA will actually start to produce fat ahead of time, thinking, well, any day now there's going to be more toxins. It'd be like saying, hey, this winter is going to be, it's like reading the Farmer's Almanac, right? It's like, this winter is going to be really bad. Everybody go ahead and put an extra layer of insulation in your house, reblow the stuff into your attic, like board up the windows, get a couple space heaters, because we know it's coming. Your body's doing the same thing, but it's coming from your DNA. That's kind of bad news. Good news is you can reprogram your DNA the other way. But the way you do it is you stop putting toxins. It's like if we had multiple winters in a row that weren't very bad, we'd start going, Farmer's Almanac doesn't know what they're talking about, right? We can take the insulation down, we can take the boards down, we don't have to do that. So your body can be reprogrammed either way. So the moral of the story is, if you wouldn't put it in your body, don't put it on your body. Here's a really easy way to double check, because you might have some stuff at home and you're like, well, I think it's pretty good, the label looks like it's healthy. This is an app that you can download. There's actually two of them. So the Environmental Working Group is actually a government agency. It's one of them that I actually think is doing something good here. But the Environmental Working Group has an app that you can actually take your phone into the store or take stuff, from at home. You can scan the barcode and it'll give you information on it. It'll basically give you a toxicity score. It's really neat. There's another one called Think Dirty app. Just make sure you type that one in right. I've never used that one. Our nutritionist has in our office, but she says it's really good. Okay, last section here. And then if we have any time, we'll do some Q&A. Spine and nervous system. So this is my favorite part. Yes, because I'm a chiropractor, but this actually makes a lot of sense when it comes to healing. You'll see why. So Hippocrates, if you don't know, Hippocrates was a philosopher, a science guy from hundreds of years ago. But he actually was quoted saying, look well to the spine for the cause of all disease. And this is before we had x-rays, before we had MRIs, before we had big pharma and the AMA and all these things. But for thousands of years now, we have known that your spine and the balance of the skeletal structure of your body has an impact not just on how you feel and move, but also on the way that your body works as a whole, that it's all connected. Your bones and your joints are connected to ligaments and tendons and muscles, and it's all innervated through the nervous system. Did anybody ever go to the bodies exhibit? Anybody ever see the bodies? The most impressive part of that whole thing was at the end where they had dissected out almost an entire nervous system, and there was nothing but the nervous system. It's the brain, spinal cord, and all the nerves. And because there's so many of them, it actually made the outline of a perfect body, like a perfect outline of the body. There's so many nerves. In fact, your body's made up of 76 trillion cells on average, and every single one of those cells is innervated by a nerve. You go to the next slide there, Adam. So your nervous system is what runs and controls everything in your body. And you guys already know this. You don't need Grey's Anatomy to tell you this. This is common knowledge. But Grey's Anatomy book, not the show, right? The show was good too, but I'm talking about the textbook that we all had to read in school. But listen, the nervous system controls the function and coordinates everything else that happens in your body. So for your heart to beat, for your lungs to breathe, for your stomach to digest food, for a cut to heal on your skin, for your body to fight cancer or the flu or anything else, your brain has to send signals like electricity down the spinal cord and out the nerves to innervate and control everything that's happening in your body. You guys with me? It's just like the wires in this building are going to the lights and the sound system and the computers and everything else. And so if I were to cut the wire in the ceiling that goes to the light, what would happen to the light? It'd go out. If I cut the nerve that comes out of your neck that goes to your heart, what would happen to your heart? Same thing. That's why nobody's ever survived the guillotine. Because if you cut all the nerves in your spinal cord, everything dies. Your nervous system controls everything. Why is that important? Well, your spine's job, and this is why your spine is a part of this, your spine's job is to surround and protect your nervous system. So we all know that your skull protects your brain, but in the same way, your spine protects the extension of your brain, which is your brainstem and your spinal cord, and the nerve roots, which eventually connect to and control everything else in your body. And because of life, Adam, will you go to the next slide there? In life, we injure our spine. And there are a lot of different ways this happens, and this stuff happens to everybody, right? Whether it's lifting stuff that you shouldn't, or too often, or in a funny position, or like the guy in the upper right, like sitting at a desk, over and over and over again, or doing the lady on the bottom right, like I know you guys don't do this, but being on your phone for too long throughout the day, right? Even the birth process, I'm going to share a study in a minute, but even the birth process can cause trauma to our spine, and car accidents, slips, trips, and falls, you guys get it. But because of these life things that happen to us, our spine can become shifted or out of alignment. And the term for that is called subluxation. So in the world of chiropractic, we call this condition subluxation. And really simply, this is just a really simple iteration of this, but subluxation is just simply when the spine's out of alignment. And it can happen when one bone shifts, it can happen when a whole region of the spine shifts, it can happen when your whole entire spine shifts, like in the case of scoliosis. That's subluxation. Categorically, technically speaking, subluxation is just when your spine's out of alignment, and what happens is when your spine shifts, whether it's one bone or a whole bunch of them, it causes interference in the nerves in that area, right? Just like in this picture, you can see the red one, that's like a hose that's trying to water your lawn, and if you kink the hose, the lawn does what? It turns brown and eventually it dies because your lawn has to have water. And in the same way, your body, your organs, your tissues, your cells, they have to have nerve supply. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that healing is facilitated through the nervous system. Yes, it's important to eat right. Yes, it's important to think right. Yes, it's important to exercise and to get the Think Dirty app and get rid of all the toxic stuff at home. It's important to do all that stuff. But ultimately, the foundation underneath all of that is the health of your nervous system. It's what runs and controls it all. Again, just like the wiring in this building, it's controlling the function of everything else. And there's been studies. It's kind of funny because I hear every now and again, although not too much anymore, but I'll hear every now and again like, oh, chiropractic doesn't work, or I don't believe in chiropractic, or whatever it might be. And the thing is that chiropractic is not a belief system. Chiropractic is simply the practice or the application of this principle. Right? So whether you believe it or not, if I push that bone back into alignment, which is what a chiropractor is supposed to do, right? Find and remove subluxations, whatever that nerve's connected to is going to work a lot better. Whether that's your eyes, ears, nose, throat, your heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, stomach, arms, legs, or even just the muscles in your neck or your head, whatever's on the other end of that nerve is going to function better. In fact, what's really interesting is the way that chiropractic was discovered, real quick history lesson, was back in 1895, this guy named D.D. Palmer, who at the time was just a magnetic healer. Magnets were like a really big part of medicine at that point in history. He was a magnetic healer in Davenport, Iowa, and he's working late one night, and this guy named Harvey Lillard was the janitor. And so Harvey Lillard was cleaning up around Dee Dee's desk, and they got to talking, and Harvey Lillard says, hey, you know what? I know you're a magnetic healer. I just want to let you know, see if you have any ideas about this. I've been deaf in this ear for 20 years. What do you think? And so Dee Dee, being a health guy, starts palpating and pushing around in his neck, and he goes, you know what? Your neck doesn't feel very right here. In fact, it feels like there's something like sticking out of your neck. It doesn't feel like the other side. How about I push on it and see if we can get it back in the middle, and we'll see what happens. Can you imagine? There was no chiropractic at that point. This was like total rogue stuff. And the guy's like, well, what's the worst that could happen? Like, I stay deaf? Like, I'm already there. Pushes the bone back. Harvey Lillard comes back the next morning, perfectly restored hearing. That's how chiropractic started. If you've ever been to a chiropractic who went to Palmer, that's where Palmer came from, or the Palmer method. That's an old school chiropractic technique. That's where it all started. Started with a deaf guy getting his hearing back. It did not start with some guy who had neck pain or back pain or sciatica and someone figured out how to fix it. Do we see a lot of that? Of course. But it's more about the nervous system and the function of the organs on the other end. Okay? A couple of studies. This one's interesting. The vagus nerve, which is the nerve that comes out right here underneath your skull. It's the very, very top bone in your neck, the first nerve that comes out. Innervates all of your major organs. Vagus means wandering, which is why Las Vegas is called Las Vegas, the wandering city in the middle of the desert. That's true. The wandering nerve that comes out of the base of your skull innervates everything, including the organs that facilitate and control metabolism. They have found that when the atlas is misaligned and it causes irritation on the vagus nerve, it actually affects and slows down your metabolism, which can cause weight gain. It also affects immune resiliency, meaning you get sicker more often, and you get sick when other people don't. You're predisposed to that. Nervous system controls everything. Here's another one. Chiropractic and immunity. One study found that people that saw a chiropractor on a regular basis for over 5 years had 200% greater immune competence than people who did not receive chiropractic care. And it's not because they had less back pain and so they didn't get sick as much. You guys get what I'm saying? It's the nervous system. It's not about your back pain. Here's another one. Babies. This one's really fascinating. This is from a medical doctor in Germany, Dr. Gutmann. Listen to this. He found that 80% of all children are in autonomic imbalance. There's two parts of your nervous system, autonomic or sympathetic and autonomic. Autonomic is all the automatic stuff. Autonomic imbalance and may have atlas blockages or subluxations. This is a medical doctor. Found that 80% of babies, even babies that are born naturally, right? And then that can lead to a whole host of things. This is probably my favorite one, right? Because like a lot of people, I never had a chiropractic miracle story where I went in with a ton of pain and came out with none. I just became a chiropractor and started getting adjusted just because it made a lot of sense to me. I was always an athlete. I played college football. I've done a bunch of triathlons since then. Performance is my thing. If my body can perform, I'm happy. Anything that impedes performance is not a good thing, in my opinion. So I'm always looking for ways to get the edge, to get my body tuned to the highest level possible. They did this study, and basically what they did is they took a bunch of people, over 300 people, 65 and older, so not athletes, but 65 and older, and they tracked them for over 5 years, people that got adjusted consistently, like every other week or every week, and they found that the chiropractic group had way better health outcomes. And the two that matter the most to me are people that got adjusted consistently had 62% less outpatient surgery and spent 85% less on drugs. And again, it's not just because they had less back pain. Why am I talking about this? Am I trying to convince you to go to a chiropractor? Absolutely. But I'm also trying to convince you to just pay attention to your spine. Even if you don't go to a chiropractor, sit up straight. Don't slouch. When you're on your phone, make sure it's in a good posture. When you're sitting at your desk, pay attention to your ergonomics. When you're sitting in your car seat, pay attention to how you're doing that. When you're sleeping at night, sleeping on your stomach's bad for you. Sleeping on your back is better for you. We're not going to get into all the nuances, but the point is, that you've got to pay attention to your spine in order for your nervous system to be healthy. Your nervous system has to be healthy for your body to heal. Not because I said so, but because that's the way God created your body. Does that make sense? I want to tell you a story real quick, and then we'll wrap this up. These are x-rays, if you couldn't tell. Those are x-rays. The one on the left is normal, so these are x-rays of your lower back and your pelvis. And then the one on the right is not normal. You see the difference? I hope you can. Do you want to come up here? So this is fascinating to me, and this is why I love what I do, because I literally get to show up and go to the office every day and look at stuff like this and try to dissect and unpack what's going on with people's health. And obviously, if you looked at these x-rays, you might think, oh man, that person's probably got really bad low back pain, or maybe they have sciatica, or maybe they have like mid-back pain or tightness in their hips or something like that. And yeah, most likely either they do now or they will in the future, but you also have to understand that between every vertebra, there's a nerve that goes to an organ. And so when I look at x-rays, I'm not just looking at what's causing this person's pain, although I am looking at that because that's probably what's most important to you at the moment, but I'm also looking at where else do these nerves go? And interestingly, the nerves in your lower back go to your digestive organs and your reproductive organs. And so if this is your spine, whether you're manifesting symptoms or issues now or not, eventually you would. Because again, you can only kink the hose that's watering the lawn for so long before your lawn starts to show problems. Yes? Why? Because it's a law. It's a universal law that your lawn has to have water. It's a universal law that your body has to have nerve supply. The good news is that this stuff is fixable. And part of fixing it is just awareness, right? It's just awareness. It's not just going to the chiropractor. It's awareness. It's understanding the importance and value of your spine. It's also paying attention to your posture and ergonomics. Don't go to the next one just yet. But it's fixable. And better to hear it from someone else than me. And you guys love and know Mary, I'm sure. And many of you probably already know her story, but I think it's just a great way to send this home and prove the point.
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Mary. I'm one of the worship leaders right here at Encounter Church. Yeah. So my husband and I moved up here to Idaho about 6 years ago. We're going on 7 years from California. And when we moved up here, we were in the middle of infertility struggle that had been going on since I was about 30 years old. And I knew that my spine looked like that because I started chiropractic care when I was 6 years old. So I've had quite a long history with chiropractic, had scoliosis probably since I was born, I don't know, but at least since from 6 years old. So I had been going to all of these doctors to deal with infertility, and I have this really cool form of infertility called unexplained, which means that they don't know what's wrong with you. It's really fun when the doctor looks at you and says, I don't know why you're not pregnant. So we had gone to about 5 different infertility specialists along the way. By the time we moved up here, I had completely given up hope of ever having a child. We had attempted adoption a couple times, and we had just kind of just moved on. So moved up here, and anyone who's had chiropractic care knows it's really hard to find a good one, right? And so
Sorry about that, by the way.
It is, you know. I had so many over the years, and so we moved here, and I just couldn't find the heart to look. So I went for the first year living here without having my chiropractic care. And so fast forward, the whole purpose why I came to Summit was my fingers had gone numb. So I'm like, well, I probably should get this looked at. And Dr. Google said I was dying, and so I looked around, asked some questions, and I was referred to Summit. So I walked in and immediately could tell it was a different place. And the whole thing, the presentation about the spine that he just did, as I was sitting there during that presentation, it was like this light bulb just went on in my head, because I know my spine looks like this, and then the nerves going to the reproductive organs. And so I just asked you, I was like, could this cause infertility or miscarriage? And he's like, yeah, it could. And immediately it was just, take all my money, if it works, I mean, that's amazing, right? And so I started chiropractic care, and I want to say it was like February or March. And I was pregnant. I found out I was pregnant on Father's Day. So we have our little miracle that runs around this place. This is Jack when he was born. He got adjusted within 24 hours of birth. And he loves Dr. Ryan. He's very sad that he couldn't be here tonight.
That's me adjusting Woody on the right, just so you know. Because sometimes to get the kids warmed up, you got to take care of their toys and stuff.
So I just want to say, like Paul says in Philippians, he said, I thank my God every day for you. And our family, we do. We give thanks for Summit, and we give thanks for you. So I really appreciate everything that you do.
Well,
you
thank
guys
you.
are amazing.
I appreciate that. Great job. So I just want to be clear, I didn't do the healing in her body, right? Her body had that potential the whole time. And that's also why I love doing what I do. It's the most amazing thing. Helping people get rid of their back pain or the numbness and tingling in their fingers or whatever it is. I know that's important to you in the moment because it's interfering with your quality of life. But even bigger than that, you have this healing potential that God's put in your body. And I look at my job as helping you find and remove the interference so that can manifest, right? I didn't give her any health that she didn't already have. God put this amazing power in her body. We just helped bring it to the surface, if that makes sense, right? And so why am I spending so much time on chiropractic? It's not because I necessarily want you guys all to come and see me, although I do. It's because the other 4 things that we talked about, mindset, nutrition, exercise, detox, those are all things that you can go do, right? And most likely you probably had an idea of those things anyway before you came here. But I have found, after speaking thousands of times now to thousands of people, that this concept, like Mary said, even people that have seen chiropractors for years just don't truly understand the intent and the purpose and the foundation of the spine and the nervous system. And my hope is that for some of you, there's this light bulb moment. And whether you come see me or not, or maybe it's just that you start paying better attention to your posture, or you start doing your exercises, or whatever it might be, I think that has the potential to be radically life-changing. Maybe even more so than some of the other stuff. Now, I think you should do all of it, otherwise I wouldn't have talked about it. But I do know that your spine and nervous system is the foundation of everything else in your body. So I'm going to hang out, and just as you guys are making your way out and stuff, we're not going to do it as a group necessarily, but I'll hang out and answer questions if anybody has any. I do want to let you know that if you are here tonight and you are interested in coming to see me for whatever reason, these are, will you go back a couple slides to the warning signs? Can you go back there? Yeah. So these are some of the more common signs of subluxation of the spine, but as you could tell or imagine, anything is possible because your nervous system controls it all. But if you have a health issue and you would just like me to take a look at it, you want to sit down, you want to talk about it, you want to see potentially, is it a subluxation of my spine or is it something else? How do I know? We take people through a very thorough process to find out, right? And what we do is we take x-rays. So if you want to go to that next slide, Adam. What we do is we take x-rays. Yeah, there you go. So we do an exam and consultation just like anywhere else, but we take x-rays and we also do a thermography scan. And this is really interesting. This is actually technology that NASA created to evaluate the health of their astronauts in space. And then chiropractors took it and adapted it for the spine and nervous system. But we have a scan that we roll up your spine, and it's that diagram there, and it looks for hot spots in the subcutaneous tissues along your spine. The reason why that's important is just like a live wire in the drywall would eventually cause heat and melt the drywall or cause heat behind the wall. Your nervous system does the same thing with subluxation. And so when there's pressure or friction or tension on a nerve, that nerve ultimately becomes inflamed and it gives off heat. And we can see that with a thermal scan without even doing x-rays. So like a lot of our pregnant patients who can't have x-rays, a lot of our cancer patients who shouldn't have x-rays, and especially our pediatric patients who are too small for x-rays or can't sit or stand still, we do the thermal scan. And so it's a great insight into the nervous system without x-rays. And then if you're old enough, you can stand and it's not contraindicated, then of course we take x-rays so that we can pinpoint exactly what the problem is and then put together a plan for you that makes sense if in fact it is subluxation. So again, this is not why I'm here, but I talked to Pastor Craig about this and we were in agreement that if you guys have a desire to come and see me, normally it's $200 to go through the new patient process. If you guys are interested, we're going to do it for $77, and we're going to donate that $77 to the Future Ready Fund. And I think you guys probably already, I think everyone probably already knows what that is, I'm assuming, but from my understanding, it's just a fund that's getting ready for the future. And it sounds like you guys are expanding, which is awesome, because like I said in the beginning, I don't think that God lets anything expand that he doesn't have his hand on, right? So anyway, the way that this is going to work is if you have an interest in coming to see us, we have appointment times all next week and even the week after. We can find something that works in your schedule. But there are some forms in the back. Oh, you got them. Oh, they all got, or you have them. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can go ahead and, sorry, you're right in front of me. She's going to just hand these out. And if you want to bring kids that weren't here or spouses that weren't here, they're more than welcome to take advantage of the same thing. I would love it if I could take those with me tonight and then give them to the front desk, and then they will call or email or maybe even text you if that's easier to schedule the appointment time. If you want to just take it with you and think about it so that you can look at your schedule, that's okay too. I would just prefer that if you do decide that you want to make an appointment, try to contact us by the end of the week. It's really hard for our office to keep track of this kind of thing weeks or months down the road. So either I can take them with me tonight, so if you already know you want to make an appointment, I'll just hang out, and if you guys want to hand those to me, either up here or back there, I'll take them back to the office, and then they'll reach out and schedule your appointment time. Or if you want to go home and think about it, just contact the office. The information's on there. You can contact the office, preferably by the end of the week, okay? Last thing I want to read, real quick. 1 Corinthians 6:19-20 says, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own, you were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies." And more so than anything tonight, my hope is that something stirred inside of you to motivate and inspire you to just honor God in a better way with your body. And really, I think that's what it is. I think when you go to the gym, when you choose to eat clean, when you throw out your toxic personal care products, when you make better decisions, when you sleep more, when you hydrate more, when you turn off the news and the social media, you're doing those things not just because it's going to make you look and feel better in your body, which they will, but it's because you're choosing to honor God with this vessel that he gave you to carry out a specific purpose while you're here on planet Earth. Okay. Love you. Thanks.
What an amazing word from God. Our prayer is that it impacted you as much as it's impacted us here at Encounter. So if this has changed your life, please like and subscribe to our page. Also, you can message below this video and just connect with us. You can also connect with us on Facebook. And if you've given your life over to Jesus, we want to know about it. So you can direct message us on Facebook. There's a lot of ways that you can connect with us on our website. So we thank you so much for tuning in, and we're just hoping that you have a great day and that God blesses you throughout your week.